la gente tiene que buscar el buen ejemplo, tanto como los ejemplos de nuestros antepasados, nuestros abuelos, y eso hay que tratarse la manera de animarse más, acercarnos más sobre eso para que valiera la pena el tiempo. Nace de nuevo y los ejemplos también. Los ejemplos de nuestros abuelos, ellos respetaban entre ellos mismos y respetaban mucho la naturaleza. Pero ahora está perdido, entonces lo que tenemos que hacer, tenemos que acercarnos más de la cultura para ver que se va a cambiar una forma nueva y un respeto. Ahora estamos terminando el quinto sol. El primer sol, la gente tenía respeto de la humanidad y de la naturaleza. Pero ya el cuarto sol, el respeto se ha perdido. El respeto de la humanidad y de la naturaleza. Ya estamos en el quinto sol, pues como que se va a poner más peor, pero tenemos que tratar la manera de ser un nuevo renacimiento de la humanidad y la naturaleza. Y ya pues una oportunidad que vamos a tener terminando el quinto sol, hay que aprovechar y hay que acercarse más para como que es un ejemplo darle el tiempo como el primer sol que vamos a iniciar en el 2012. El tiempo no se va a terminar, se va a empezar una nueva época y un nuevo renacimiento de la humanidad.
The example of our ancestors living during the first sun, approximately 260 centuries ago, which Maya teacher Antonio is referring to in his words, is encoded in the mystery of the ancient ruins among which his elder Don Filiberto and Taino teacher Miguel Sagay offered ceremony in the summer of 2011. The encoded messages in many of these ruins, which repeatedly make reference to pregnancy and rebirth, reveal secrets pertaining to the extraordinary transformations that were experienced by human beings during that distant era 26,000 years ago, the last time the Sun and the Milky Way galaxy were lined up on the December 21st solstice. An earlier excerpt of this presentation features a speculation by John Major Jenkins that there might just be something to the concept of some sort of energy flow arising from the galactic alignment. An energy flow that might exert some sort of influence on humankind. In fact, there are other theoreticians who have postulated that the galaxy and the Sun act as focusing lenses, which are allowing a beam of transformational energy to reach the Earth during this period, creating the catalyst for a creative momentum. This momentum may have influenced humanity once before, 260 centuries ago, when the Sun, the Earth, and the galaxy were aligned in much the same manner that they are aligned today. It was roughly at that point in human prehistory, 260 centuries ago, during the last ice age, that people began taking utilitarian objects developed over thousands of years of prehistoric technological advancement and began to use them for a totally new purpose. Body dyes and paints originally designed to cover the skin and protect it from insect bites began to be used to create aesthetic images of the primitive animals that inhabited the ancient world in which those people lived. Clay working skills previously used to create crude, unfired, sun-dried mud containers were put to a new use, the art of sculpture. People all over the world began to express heretofore impossible to express abstract inner yearnings and aspirations in a new and emotive tangible form. We know that they were doing this because they left evidence of their creations all over the world, and we are now discovering that evidence. And this new form of human expression did not only take the form of painting and sculpture. We know that all the arts arose at roughly the same time because we see evidence of less tangible artistic expressions such as dance, storytelling drama, music, and poetry, expressed in the paintings of those who witnessed those performances. We offer this example of an ancient Ice Age painting depicting a man dressed in an impressive costume with antlers, performing a ritual dance. Where there was dance, there had to have been music. Humanity had always been a species uniquely dependent on communication for its survival. During that extraordinary time, humans discovered a new way of communicating, which allowed them to express the language of the soul. That new communication is now known as media. Through media, humans were able to convey spiritual concepts that were impossible to express in words. Only art could accurately express these concepts, and the arts evolved into ritual and ceremony, creating the necessary foundation for the vital sensory experiences that make us human. Media became the essence of spiritual perception and expression. Through the skillful use of media, which allowed for organized communal processing of information, the new specialists, the artists and shamans, were able to help communities coalesce and bring into clear focus many complicated spiritual and mental concepts which had heretofore been perceived only dimly and vaguely because their abstract elements could not be shared accurately using only prose language. The concept of a picture being worth 1,000 words was the driving force behind this phenomenon, except that in the case of the ancient Stone Age ancestors, the issue can more accurately be explained as a picture, a song, a sculpture, a poem, a dance, a dramatization, a costume pantomime were worth 1,000 words. Within the context of the new media arose the fundamental elements that would eventually be the basis of practically all spiritual thinking all over the world. Humans developed an understanding of two harmoniously coexisting forces of the cosmos, one male and one female. The male usually representing the vital essence of energy and life, the female representing the fundamental concept of source, maternal creative origin place, and the nurturing, nourishing force. It was this maternal source entity, the mother of fertility, who they believed controlled the amount of nourishment that the environment was capable of yielding, that interested the early hunter-gatherers most keenly. They expressed her ability to give forth the bounty of the earth in images of pregnant and matronly stone, bone, and clay figurines, now known as Venuses. This image here shows a particularly expressive example of those sculptures now called the Venus of Willendorf. At that time, the solar lord, who was often associated with the male element of the cosmos, was rising every winter solstice morning, firmly embedded within the image of the swollen, pregnant area at the center of the Milky Way galaxy. To the Mayas, this image would have been symbolic of a new beginning, and in fact, the transition to a species that could express itself in graphic and demonstrative symbolic form was a momentous beginning indeed. This was the beginning of the first sun, the first 5,200-year period of the Great Cycle, and it marked the start of a long, prosperous journey of our species, which, after finishing this particular one, would traverse 4 other similar periods of time. Human beings persevered during the long, harsh, cold centuries of the Ice Age, nurtured and sustained by the wonderful system of spiritual and mental expression they had developed. And the second 5,200-year period came and went as their skills in using the magical media improved and were refined. Then came the third sun era, and behold, At the very midpoint of that great period of time, approximately 13,000 years ago, the great ice sheets that had covered the earth for so many centuries finally began to melt. Gradually, the glaciers receded, and with the disappearance of these enormous expressions of Earth climate, the world that our ancestors had known changed inexorably. The great game animals, which had supported their phenomenal spread to practically every corner of the planet, became extinct, and the people were forced to find new ways of supporting themselves. By the beginning of the fourth sun, about 10,000 years ago, humans had made one of the most important discoveries of their long tenure on Earth. They learned to cultivate plant crops and raise tame farm animals. Scholars now call this new period of time that began at the start of the fourth sun about 10,000 years ago the Neolithic or New Stone Age. The extraordinary advances in food production that emerged in the human experience allow for populations to explode in certain parts of the world, creating the phenomenon of village, town, and even later, city life. At first, the fundamental elements of the use of media remained intact during this momentous revolution, and the ancient reverence for the all-giving divine mother entity of the ancient hunter-gatherers evolved along with the new lifestyle to adjust to the new settled environment in the form of sacred snake mother deities who reigned alongside their male sky god consorts. But later, during the waning decades of the fourth sun, there appeared signs that the ability for humans to see themselves as superior masters of the animals, plants, and other natural resources that they had domesticated, the disappearance of the mystery of life that had for centuries held their ancestors in awe of nature, the illusion that the environmental element could be owned in the form of personal or tribal property, had changed humans dramatically. Ancient, petty, low-intensity territorial competition turned into ferocious, merciless, high-volume armed conflict that involved thousands of trained warriors and hitherto unheard-of refinement in weaponry technology. The goal of all this violence was always the same: to possess what the other fellow had. And since what the other fellow had was increasingly fabulous wealth, the impetus was irresistible.